Our movie with David Norris, a remarkable new senatorial competitor showing up. Norris appears to be a lot of a group's up-and-comer, continuously cooperating with individuals, consistently sympathetic toward their requirements and stages. NBC commentator Hurl Scarborough makes a news report on Norris expanding a generally noteworthy lead over his rival. Norris next shows up on The Jon Stewart Show, where Stewart comments how a long time back, Norris began his vocation as a legislative competitor that started with a bang, or a bust. The night he was chosen, he was engaged with a bar brawl and accused of dislocated direct. Norris is seen riding with a Coast Gatekeeper watch vessel, being supported by New York City Chairman Mike Bloomberg, and unveiling more appearances, presenting his mission director, Charlie Traynor, who says that Norris is up 10 focuses. Norris' mission resembles a comet without any indications of dialing back. At one more open appearance, a man in a tan beret cap, Harry Mitchell, is seen watching and respectfully cheering, however he doesn't seem enthused. It's just about time to take care of business for final voting day when a mission associate surges up to Charlie with a duplicate of the New York Post with an article about Norris, guaranteeing he has uncovered a school gathering trick where he uncovered his exposed rear has been gotten on film. Mitchell is inauspiciously taking a gander at a record-like book when his cell rings. He's being addressed by his boss, a man named Richardson, and just lets Richardson know that he's dealing with it. Political race night shows up. Norris enters a lodging suite and turns on a news program on CNN. Before long as the program exchange starts, obviously an enormous part of Norris' constituents and citizen base have betrayed him in view of the confession in the Post. Columnist Mary Matlin discusses how Norris conquered the deficiency of his whole family, his mom and sibling when he was only 10, and afterward his dad when he was a secondary school rookie, to turn into the most youthful individual at any point chose for the place of delegates. Yet the saloon battle added to the confession photograph to make Norris look juvenile and rash. Norris is presently following his rival in the surveys by an edge nearly as critical as his prior lead. 4 men in suits and caps stroll across a rooftop top. Among them are Mitchell and Richardson. Richardson says them 4 have their work removed for them. Toward the finish of the discourse he just says, "We should get him in the groove again." At Norris Inn, he and Traynor are watching political decision survey results come in. Norris is crushed in the vote counts for Suffolk Province, and all the more horrendously, his home district of Brooklyn. He and Traynor realize that the vote will be an all-out avalanche triumph for Norris' rival. NBC News Inclusion predicts this avalanche rout for Norris even before all the province casting a ballot surveys are finished. Norris lurks off alone to deal with the concession discourse. He goes into the men's space to think. As he assembles his concession discourse, he at last hears commotion from one of the confidential slows down. It's involved to show, by a lady. Elise Sellis emerges from the slowdown, shoeless and holding her shoes. She makes sense of that she'd been in there stowing away from security after she crashed a wedding on a self-dare. She was in the slowdown when Norris entered and, too frightened to even consider emerging and concede that she was in a men's room, wound up coincidentally paying attention to him dealing with his discourse. Sellis perceives Norris and figures out that he's lost the political decision. The two begin to bond immediately, Sellis conceding she believed Norris' gathering trick was entertaining. Sellis rapidly sees that Norris loves being in a group, loves being the focal point of consideration among enormous gatherings. Out of nowhere without much forethought, Norris and Sellis begin kissing energetically, having rapidly become beguiled by one another. The kiss is interfered with by Traynor, who goes into the rest space to get David for his concession discourse. Norris rushes out after Sellis in order to organize to see her once more, however insecurity shows up looking for her and she needs to make an exceptionally rushed run for it. Norris' concession discourse begins moving and strong, yet out of nowhere he removes it from his head and starts talking openly about how his mission broke down and cancelled, paying a lot of cash to proficient specialists, over the shade of his tie and how much his shoes ought to be scraped. As he removes one shoe to show his allies, camera flashbulbs go off. Richardson meets Mitchell in a recreation area at the crack of dawn and lets him know that Norris needs to spill espresso on his shirt no later than 7:05 a.m. Mitchell guarantees Richardson he'll get Norris soon as he enters the recreation area. Norris awakens and dresses, standing by listening to a morning monetary news report that discussions about how he is turning into a senior accomplice in an organization called RSR Funding. He is presently not a senator, however his concession discourse was jolting, with the eventual result of making him a leader in the following impending Senate race for the other Senate seat for New York, in 2010. Norris, mission chief, trainer, is the pioneer behind RSR. Mitchell falls asleep while holding up in the recreation area and awakens with perfect timing to see Norris board his transport. The window of 7:05 a.m. passes. He gets his book from his inside pocket and sees it in alert. Frantic, he begins pursuing the transport, tenaciously pursuing it. As Norris sheets the transport, he is paralyzed to find another person falling asleep there. Celis. He plunks down next to her as she awakens. The two quickly start reassociating, and Norris educates Celis concerning his new position he's beginning. She's against his not running again in 2010. As the bus stations, Mitchell gets up to speed yet can't stumble into the convergence where restricting traffic has the green light. He checks his watch, seeing it's simply past 7:05 a.m., and motions at the transport. The transport staggers abruptly, Norris' espresso spilling. However, it spills on Celis' skirt and leggings, not on Norris. After a second, Mitchell is hit hard from behind by a taxi. He demands to the social affair swarm he's okay, and is more worried about his book. He glimpses inside it, and a diagram-like presentation of lines begins to change such that Mitchell notes with dismay. Meanwhile, Norris and Celis are proceeding to talk, and it's unmistakable they're both being a tease. At the point when Norris' BlackBerry rings, Celis energetically snatches it out of his pocket and sticks it into his espresso. She thinks of her name and number on a card for Norris so he can call her later. Norris calls Trainer and they momentarily discuss a proposition Norris made on putting resources into sunlight-based chargers. Trainer accepts it will be too costly and insufficient examination has been finished to show it as advantageous, however he offers to Norris, "Persuade me at the gathering." Norris shows up at the RSR workplaces, good tidings, a few specialists without seeing they appear to be frozen in time. He goes into the gathering space to track down Richardson there with some of his men, one of them waving an odd instrument over Trainer, who is frozen in time. Unfit to comprehend how Norris sees him and his men, Richardson orders Norris seized. Norris escapes, however every turn he finds a greater amount of Richardson's men meeting on him, apparently showing up out of all over. Richardson himself keeps on showing up before Norris every step of the way. Norris figures out how to lock himself inside Trainer's office and wildly dials 911. Richardson's men get through the locked entryway as though it wasn't locked. Norris is snatched, cholo formed and hauled through one of the entryways, into an unfilled distribution center. Norris stirs, tuning in complete disarray as Rear Hardson takes a stab at let his men know that Norris must be reset. However, the executive could never sign a request supporting it. He tunes in, stunned, to Richardson and another man squabbling about him in wording Norris does not know with respect to what they mean. At last Richardson approaches Norris and heeds his associate's guidance, educating Norris concerning himself. Richardson is essential for a gathering called the Change Department, entrusted with ensuring things work out as expected. The plan, as Richardson calls it, is the means by which recent developments should go and how individuals' day-to-day routines should be experienced. The change agency, which will be called TAB for short henceforth, in this abstract, attempts to address minor deviations from the arrangement. Obviously, Norris believes that Richardson is nuts, yet Richardson demonstrates that he can guess what Norris might be thinking, and further, he's ready to twist up a little piece of floor to trip Norris when he attempts to run, by simply pointing at that piece of floor. Richardson makes sense of how Norris should spill his espresso, in this way missing his transport and showing up working 10 minutes after the fact, which would have kept him from seeing Richardson and TAB changing Trainer to adjust his perspective on Norris' sun-powered charger proposition. Since Norris has seen TAB in real life, Richardson needs confirmation that Norris won't ever enlighten another spirit regarding what he's seen, something no human should know exists. That's what Richardson says, assuming Norris at any point discusses TAB, they'll reset his mind, deleting his character and causing him to appear to the remainder of the world, to be mental and crazy until the end of his life. However, at that point, regrettably, Richardson additionally lets Norris know that his gathering with Celis on the transport shouldn't occur and he's at no point ever expected to see her in the future. His men effectively search Norris to find the card on which Celis had thought of her name and number, and they consume it. Two Tab individuals drag Norris to an entryway and toss him through it, and he winds up back in Trainor's office in RSR. Before he could actually get back up, Trainor comes in through the other entryway, upset since he'd called Norris multiple times without a response. Trainor carries Charlie to the gathering and supports the sun-powered charger proposition. Be that as it may, after the gathering, Trainor is confused. Before the entire disaster with Tab, Norris had let Trainor know how he'd run into Elise once more, and on second thought of being thrilled with bliss, he's behaving like he's in a major obscurity of disarray about everything. In truth, Norris is not really ready to accept what he'd gone through but not thinking for even a second to express an expression of it, on the off chance that the danger given by Richardson was valid. Sometime later, Norris is in a little bar/barbecue, attempting to review Celis' telephone number from memory. Mitchell shows up, asking why Norris is focused on one lady when his entire world has been flipped around. He lets Norris know that regardless of whether he recalled the number, Tab had numerous ways of settling on certain the decision won't ever go through. He demands that Tab changes just roll out little improvements in the manner individuals reason. Tweaking feelings was excessively meddlesome and could wind up with numerous unexpected and accidental side changes, called swells. All that Tab truly does must be endorsed by the executive, which Mitchell says is only a name Tab utilizes. He implies concerning a portion of the names that individuals call the director. At long last Mitchell says it's undependable to talk at the bar/barbecue. He offers to meet Norris on the 4 p.m. Staten Island ship and he'll answer anything he's permitted to reply there. Before he leaves, in any case, Mitchell rehashes Richardson's admonition about resetting Norris assuming that he uncovers the presence of Tab. On the boat, Mitchell lets Norris know that when he showed up at RSR and strolled in on Tab changing Trainor, they were essentially making unpretentious changes in the manner he weighs ventures, which would change the course of the organization as expected. He demands that Tab really can't understand minds or hear considerations, they can simply detect when individuals gauge decisions and choices, especially when those choices drift away from plan. Despite the fact that Tab should screen the entire world, there aren't enough of them to keep watch on each person. What's more, as Mitchell brings up, water impedes Tab's ability to peruse individuals' dynamic cycles. Mitchell doesn't have the foggiest idea why Tab is keeping Norris from tracking down Celis, however he realizes that Tab has consumed an adequate number of assets as of now to make the need to keep them separated vital. Mitchell urges Norris to continue on with his own personal business. Regardless of whether Tab wasn't effectively attempting to keep him from Celis, which they are, New York City has such countless individuals that the chances of running into her again are close to nothing. 3 years pass, and Norris has attempted to do as Mitchell suggested. However, he keeps on riding a similar transport he met Celis on, simultaneously as the last time he ran into her there, sitting in similar two-fold seat both of them shared. Also, at some point, it works out, he's riding on the transport and spots Celis strolling down the road. Getting off the transport, he hustles after her, to track down her gathering of him somewhat cooler than previously. Yet, he prevails upon her back by promising on the graves of his folks, excessively weighty, however it's valid, he says, that his wallet, which contained her number, was taken from him in a robbing, and that he researched her most memorable name just to get 757,000 connections. None of which prompted her since he didn't have the foggiest idea about her last name. A Tab part hurries into Richardson's office. The man's book shows that Norris and Celis have gotten together once more. Richardson is in shock. He realizes Norris has ridden similar transport consistently for a very long time wanting to find Celis once more, and can barely accept how he just found her again by some coincidence. Richardson rushes right into it, making little changes, including slicing influence to a studio where Celis plays out. The camera changes to Celis and Norris talking, and she's letting him know that she's an expert ballet artist at an organization called Cedar Lake, and she'll be giving a show at the studio tomorrow. As Norris and Celis sit at a pleasant bistro for beverages, Richardson and his companion, McCready, find that Celis' dynamic tree is beginning to go toward an enormous number of unexpected intonation focuses. Richardson plans changes that will change the area of the Cedar Lake practice without a second to spare. However, the arrangement book shows another significant expression point. In the event that they security sufficiently close to share a genuine kiss, all possible endeavors by Tab to isolate Norris and Celis once more, will create swell outcomes far in overabundance of their dispensed cut-off. Luckily, another Tab aide has gone Trainer to track down Norris and Celis. At the point when Trainer lets Norris know that a huge group is assembled at the Brooklyn scaffold to hear David show up discourse in anticipation of a 2010 Senate run, Celis asks Norris not to put the discourse off only for the good of she. She lets him know she's simply heard her practice will be at Dock 17, exceptionally near the scaffold. Richardson is feeling significantly better as he sees Trainer and Celis push for Norris to do according to plan. As Norris shows up at the scaffold to make his declaration discourse for Senate bid in 2010, Richardson and his partner are seeing an instant message shipped off Celis reporting the practice had quite recently been moved back to Cedar Lake. Be that as it may, as the discourse finishes, and Norris and Trainer are going endlessly, Norris ends up spotting Richardson noticing him from a window. Looking ever-changing between the window and Dock 17, Norris sorts out what Richardson has done. Declining to withdraw from Trainer about the requirement for a subsequent meeting, Norris hustles to Dock 17 and sufficiently sure, thinks that it is shut. In any case, this time Norris has a clear name he can pinpoint, Cedar Lake. He calls 411 to get the location, however Richardson kills his sign. At the point when Richardson sees Norris racing to the stopping chaperone to utilize the firm stance, Richardson cuts that sign too. Norris sees a cafe across the road, and Richardson, exasperated, cuts all telephone signals in a 3-block range. He by starts to follow Norris to attempt to talk some sense into him. Be that as it may, Norris won't withdraw in any event, when Richardson goes up against him up close and personal. He couldn't care less if, the administrator, by composed the plan, he doesn't acknowledge it as right in the event that it's so totally put on keeping him and Celis aside. Taking a gander at Richardson, Norris at last sorts out that Richardson himself doesn't have the foggiest idea why it's so earth-shakingly critical that Norris and Celis be kept separated. At the point when Richardson can't reply, Norris is loaded up with significantly more determination. At long last outfoxing Richardson unequivocally, Norris strolls into the cafe and cordially requests the consideration of all the staff and supporters, inquiring as to whether any of them have known about Cedar Lake Dance Studio, and where he can track down it. One of the eatery visitors knows the area. Richardson and his partner check their arrangement book, presently both frantic. They keep all cabs going through from getting Norris to give him a ride, yet unafraid, Norris chooses to run in the event that he needs to, provoking Richardson about the number of little changes that he's making in the number of individuals' arrangements, causing increasingly more wave that impacts. Norris at long last gets a cab to stop for him, yet the taxi is quickly hit hard by a vehicle. Norris hails an emergency vehicle and police. Be that as it may, when one official makes a solid attempt to keep asking him inquiries, Norris sorts out he's really a tab part and goes to talk with the sergeant, who guarantees him the police can call him on the off chance that need be. Norris hails another taxi and payoffs him $100 to violate a couple of transit regulations to rush to Cedar Lake. Richardson and McCready race frantically after Norris, and we see they can pass through standard ways to involve them as instant transportation entryways. Enunciation focuses show up in the arrangement book and they see that once Norris sees Celis dance, Richardson will have arrived at his wave limit. Richardson has a go at obstructing the studio's entryways, yet it's past the point of no return. Norris investigates the studio and starts to watch Celis practicing. Richardson's arrived at his wave breaking point and Norris knows it. Yet, as Richardson's cell phone rings, he cautions Norris that the directing of his arrangement might be kicked higher up. Overlooking Richardson, Norris turns around to the practice, charmed at seeing Celis moving. In the tab base camp, Richardson is met by his nearby unrivaled, Donaldson, who has done a few examination on all that has been occurring with Norris and Celis. He's found that the explanation they got together by chance twice, notwithstanding everything that has been finished to keep them separated, is on the grounds that their arrangements were rethought of some time back. Norris and Celis were initially intended to be together and to experience passionate feelings for, and it was only after 2005 that Celis' arrangement was recomposed so she would remain with Adrian, the lead choreographer for Cedar Lake. Remainders of the first arrangement holds pushing Norris and Celis back together and why they feel so firmly about one another, associating with such ease and profoundly. Conversing with one of his subordinates, Donaldson says that tidying up the wreck will mean acquiring perhaps of Tab's heaviest hitter, a change manager named Thompson, who is nicknamed the Sledge in Tab for his strategies. Norris and Celis have been strolling through the roads of Manhattan, talking and interfacing, during the entire scene. It's night, and Celis needs to carry Norris to a dance club. Norris feels he is a horrendous artist, so Celis offers him a challenge. She'll race him from where they're remaining to the closest light post. Assuming she wins, he needs to come to the club with her. To improve the pot, that's what she concurs. Assuming Norris wins, she'll move for him back at one of their condos. Celis energetically says there are no principles, whereupon Norris quickly takes off and constructs an impossible lead, as Celis can't run quick in the shoes she's wearing. Be that as it may, in an entertaining turtle and bunny turn, he stops barely short of the light post as Celis professes to yield to him, just for her to slug him in the stomach and take off running, arriving at the light post. Celis carries Norris to a dance club, which establishes an immense good connection with the club's supporters. As they're leaving the club, Norris enlightens Celis really regarding how he got into governmental issues. His dad took him to the Senate exhibition not long after Norris lost his mom and sibling in something like a month of one another, when Norris was exclusively in the 6th grade. The camera skillet in on Celis as Norris talks, and it's shown the way that the story contacts her heart. She begins to kiss Norris, the genuine kiss Richardson had worried about before. Furthermore, they wind up dozing together. As they are dozing, the camera works out from the bed to show Thompson seriously watching them sleep. Celis gets up the following morning, finding Norris gone. Her wireless rings. Adrian is calling. As she converses with him, Norris gets back with espresso for her. She tells Adrian she needs to go, and as she closes the call, she finds that he called multiple times while she was still snoozing. Celis makes sense of for Norris that Adrian is her ex, as well as a very gifted artist and choreographer, and she's shocked that he out of nowhere called her multiple times that morning 3 months after their separation. As though he realized she was with somebody, Norris' face transforms. He looks extremely worried that Tab took part in that. Be that as it may, Celis' clarification why she didn't wed Adrian is contacting. When she felt what she felt with Norris, she was unable to envision being with any other person. Norris guarantees never to hurt her, since it's the first time in quite a while that he doesn't feel alone. Norris carries Celis with him as he leaves to be evaluated on the Jon Stewart show, and she sits in his behind-the-stage changing area, amusedly watching the meeting on a screen. Similarly, as the meeting wraps, a group part for the show tells Celis that Norris requested that he tell her that he was simply assembled into an earnest conference, however he'll call her when he's finished. And that he'll see her this evening at Cedar Lake when she and her company give a live presentation. Be that as it may, the team part is really a Tab part, and as he opens an entryway for Norris, he goes through to wind up in the distribution center where he'd been taken by Richardson previously. The entryway he'd quite recently gone however is presently locked and he's caught there, and he knows why. Thompson shows up in the stockroom and presents himself. After a short trade about the idea of through and through freedom, Thompson guarantees that individuals just have freedom of thought on little consistently choices, not enormous ones with influence on numerous others. Thompson at long last uncovers why Tab is so determined to keep Norris isolated from Celis. He should meet her once, and just a single time. The gathering in the men's room of the lodging was purposeful. On the grounds that conversing with her there enlivened him to give the concession discourse that hauled him out of the verge of political ruin to turn into the leader he is today for U.S. Senate, and that he's predetermined not exclusively to be an extraordinary representative, yet an extraordinary U.S. president. In any case, on the off chance that he and Celis stay together, her energetic, striking nature would come off on the hasty Norris, which would seriously hinder his capacity to lead the country as president. At the point when Norris demands that the center of his being is settled on of the decisions he makes, and that he picks Celis, no matter what, Thompson allows him to leave the carport and says he can in any case get Celis' dance presentation assuming he hustles. Norris rushes to the Cedar Lake studio for the presentation, watching Celis hit the dance floor with her group mates. Thompson shows up there a moment later, Lastly drops the mallet. He prudently lets Norris know that Celis is bound to turn into an incredibly famous artist and choreographer with a heavenly future in the workmanship. However, in the event that she remains with Norris, her future will probably be instructing dance to little youngsters, running a little dance school, obscure beyond her neighborhood local area. At long last, before Thompson leaves, he makes Celis confuse a leap and hurt her lower leg seriously in the arrival. Troubled, Norris conveys her to the closest emergency clinic. He sits in the lounge area, agonizing, while Celis' feet and lower legs are x-rayed. As Norris pauses, Thompson shows up and lets him know that what's happened is his shortcoming. Norris irately belts Thompson with a left snare, yet Thompson coolly says that this is what Norris does, how he got into a bar brawl on his political decision to Congress, how he was shot in the humiliating article in the Post that cost him the past political race. He's been given awesome open doors the typical individual can merely fantasize about, and he's wasted them on incautious activities, which isn't being assisted by his relationship with Celis. Thompson wraps up by saying her lower leg is just hyperextended, however Norris could wind up removing all she's thought often about most. Norris goes to see Celis in the recuperation room. Her lower leg is dressed and will recuperate in no less than a month, causing her a deep sense of help. Norris gives her a profound embrace and reasons himself to make several calls prior to bringing Celis home. However, as he strolls through the lobbies of the medical clinic, it's reasonable he won't return. He's folded under the mallet and left Celis' life. Richardson approaches Mitchell at Tab Central Command to report Thompson's prosperity. The camera changes to see a gloomy Celis being rolled out of the medical clinic by one of her young lady companions. Mitchell looks blameworthy. He's started to address assuming they're making the right decision. Richardson concedes he used to feel as such, yet Tab individuals such as himself and Mitchell just consider part of the arrangement to be composed by the administrator. It's 11 months after the fact, and Norris is showing up at a little neighborhood cultivating local area. A news report gives him a stunning noteworthy lead over his rival under a month prior to final voting day. As Norris wraps up the appearance, Traynor hands Norris a paper. He realizes Norris would learn about the article at last, and he needed to be there when Norris did. The first-page article for the paper gives a gleaming survey for Celis. Her dance vocation is beginning to sparkle brilliantly, the most recent Cedar Lake show routine winning public praise. However, Traynor is highlighting one of the inset photographs in the article. It shows that Celis has reunited with Adrian, Shane McRae, and they're getting hitched in a little polite service 1 week from now. Mitchell is seen remaining before the distribution center, perusing a similar article. Norris goes to a wharf, glancing out over the water. Celis investigates her application structure for a marriage permit, looking upset. Norris goes to the little bar/barbecue he frequently visits. As he strolls in, Mitchell is seen leaving through the entry/exit of the structure right adjacent to it. The bar/barbecue's barkeep lets Norris know that his companion just left him a message. She gives him a collapsed piece of paper. At night, Norris goes to the stockroom and is met there by Mitchell. Mitchell lets Norris know that Thompson's case that Celis draws out a crazy, indiscreet side to Norris, was obviously false. In any case, Mitchell says that Celis would regardless hinder Norris' capacity to turn into a brilliant political pioneer. What makes Norris such a decent extrovert is his should be before a group, his need to blend with huge gatherings. Which originates from the extraordinary vacancy in his life made by the passing of his loved ones. Celis would fill that opening in his heart so totally that he'd lose that driving should be with others and become distant from them. Even any private fantasies about coming to the White House would blur. Why Mitchell is consenting to help Norris is that he comprehends that Norris' own aspirations are significant, however by all accounts not the only thing that is important. Mitchell realizes that Norris' dad and sibling were both extremely astute individuals, and the two of them might have, and needed to, become a lot more prominent and greater individuals than they ended up. The arrangement didn't call for it. Norris reflects and acknowledges Thompson wasn't totally unscrupulous. Norris telephones and talks and his 16 focuses up, and examiners are now foreseeing an official nomination in his future. Mitchell, grinning insightfully, recognizes that the public loves Norris. Yet, as Norris is acknowledging is valid, this public consideration was all he at any point thought often about, and he's seeing it less and less since he became engaged with Celis. In any case, he can't quit contemplating her. He inquires as to whether he knows where Celis' marriage will be occurring. Mitchell just says it will be before a common adjudicator, yet cautions Norris that Thompson will be on the scene instantly, assuming Norris attempts to go to her. Norris understands that Mitchell is hesitant to concede that Celis is unsettled. She's agreeing to second best after Norris left her. Realizing that Mitchell needs to help him, Norris inquires as to whether Mitchell can assist him with moving the manner in which a tab individual does, to show him the entryways. Mitchell says the weighty downpours outside will stop in 60 minutes, and the downpour is the main explanation. Tab has close to zero familiarity with Norris and Mitchell talking. To make every one of the arrangements in this way, they need a spot totally encompassed by water, since they'll require most of the night to work. The most importantly thing Mitchell cautions Norris is to just turn door handles clockwise. To turn them counterclockwise is just for tab individuals. Mitchell likewise makes reference to that a tab cap permits them to stroll through apparently locked entryways. Mitchell brings Norris into the city's primary siphoning station for downtown Manhattan, 10 blocks from the town hall. He advises Norris to stand by where he is, and afterward goes to an entryway and turns the handle counterclockwise. Through the somewhat open entryway, Norris can see it's bringing Mitchell back into what should be Tab's central command. Celis shows up at Cedar Lake and inquires as to whether the dance floor is open. She's hoping to rehearse for the purpose of clearing her psyche. Mitchell shows up back in the siphoning station with a satchel. He clarifies for David that Lower Manhattan has many layers of substrate, a tab expression for a considerable number of entryways that have been added over the long run, practically like a labyrinth. Indeed, even Tab can't explore downtown Manhattan as fast or effectively as additional uptown. Celis' wedding function will be in a town hall on 60 Place Road. Mitchell's satchel contains a few outline books that will permit Norris to explore the substrate, which will disrupt Thompson's capacity to follow him precisely. The camera skillet this way and that between Celis moving on the training floor in Cedar Lake, and Mitchell and Norris concentrating on the substrate plans. Mitchell gives a critical admonition to Norris that soon as he goes through the primary entryway, Tab will be all on crash alert, a hard and fast manhunt to block him. Norris should believe no one wearing any sort of cap or cap at all. Indeed, even Tab individuals can't utilize the entryways without wearing their caps. This, and the impact water has on them, are measures taken by the administrator to restrict their power. Norris thinks of another way, act of spontaneity, like thumping the cap off Thompson's head on the off chance that Thompson figures out how to remove him at a specific entryway, furthermore, making a striking, dangerous go through an uncovered region in complete resistance of what Tab would anticipate that he should do. Morning shows up, and it's pouring once more, which Mitchell brings up as a decent sign. The wedding is in a short time, yet Mitchell cautions Norris that arriving early will be essentially as terrible as arriving late. He drives Norris to an entryway that will lead into the town hall, and gives his cap to Norris. Norris goes through an entryway and makes an intense go through the downpour. Tab individuals race to activate, one of Thompson's subordinates bringing up that Norris is involving the downpour as cover, showing he knows its impact on Tab. Thompson thinks, and advises one of his men to call the delegate at the wedding. As Norris runs, Thompson and 2 men with him note with caution that Norris has a Tab cap and has gone into the substrate. Celis is met by Adrian at the town hall. She lets him know she really wants a moment in the restroom before the function. As Adrian and Celis observer sit in the court, a Tab part strolls in to keep watch. Norris shows up at the town hall, Celis observer / young lady companion letting him know that Celis isn't there. Norris squeezes her to find out where Celis is, and strolls into the restroom. Celis is stunned to see Norris enter. She attacks him genuinely for the manner in which he hurt her by leaving her at the clinic, as he frantically attempts to argue for pardoning. All of a sudden, the Tab part keeping watch at the wedding court strolls in. Norris speedily turns and takes him out with a punch. Totally frantic, Norris at long last resists the most ridiculously critical request given him about not uncovering the presence of Tab. He enlightens Celis regarding them and their job in keeping him separated from her. He takes care of the check parts arrangement book and shows it to Celis. Thompson's men rapidly notice this. Thompson requires the mediation group to be gotten for a starting point reset, and an entire group of Tab individuals hurry to prepare under Thompson's order. Celis stands, reeling with disarray at everything occurring. Norris at long last puts on his cap, takes Celis by the hand and opens an entryway in the restroom, driving her through it, onto the field of Yankee Arena. And afterward through another entryway, driving them to the flight of stairs of a Manhattan metro station. Norris realizes that Thompson will have required a reset on him and is critically attempting to consider a method for surpassing and outsmart him. Thompson and his group enter the restroom Norris and Celis had left and find them running down 6th Road in Manhattan. Norris at long last brings Celis onto Freedom Island, making them briefly protected. Celis' head reels with bewilderment, even as Norris informs her really regarding the reason Whiteab is chasing after them and why they've endeavored to keep both of them separated. How neither of them will see their most prominent objectives in general and desires happen assuming that they stay together. At last Norris concocts a thought. He takes steps to go into Tab Base Camp and attempt to track down the executive to make an immediate enticement for him. He lets Celis know that he's giving her a decision. In the event that she declines to go with him, she'll at absolutely no point ever see her or Tab in the future and her life can happen as it's been going on. Assuming she goes with him, he doesn't have any idea what's on the opposite side, yet they'll be together, which is the main thing he's needed since meeting her. Celis takes a gander at Norris briefly prior to gesturing and telling Norris she's accompanying him. Norris goes to one more entryway into the foundation of the Sculpture of Freedom, let Celis know that both of them should turn every one of the handles counterclockwise. As both of them enter Tab Central Command, both Thompson and Mitchell notice, Thompson's face in rolling all-out shock, and Mitchell moaning seriously. Norris and Celis go through a Tab concentrate on room, Thompson and group hot behind them. Being on Tab's home turf and having no clue about what direction to run, other than to turn all door handles to one side to remain inside the HQ building, puts Norris in a difficult spot. Thompson's group deliberately removes them over and over, driving them to consistently take a different path and backtrack. Mitchell is given an envelope by an unrivaled and told that he's needed in the executive's office right away. Norris and Celis at long last wind up on the housetop of the Tab Base Camp structure. The mediation group is shutting in and there is no place past on to run. Thinking the end has happened upon them, Norris and Celis share their thought processes a last, close to home farewell embrace and kiss. As they pull back, the mediation group is no longer there. They're distant from everyone else on the housetop, for 1 minute, until Thompson is remaining behind them, inquiring as to whether they genuinely figured they could arrive at the director. He advises them for figuring they could change their destiny, or compose their own. Until Mitchell comes up to Thompson, showing him an organizer. Thompson sees it, unobtrusively says, "I comprehend," and leaves. Mitchell lets Celis and Norris know that their allure for the director worked, regardless of whether they contact him. He says that nearly everybody meets the administrator once in their lives, in some structure. The administrator perceived how unswervingly committed Norris and Celis were to one another and was sufficiently propelled to recompose their arrangement once more, permitting them to remain together and be cheerful. As Norris and Celis stroll down the road, prepared to confront anything that their new coexistence has coming up for them, a voiceover from Mitchell shuts the film. Let the crowd know that perhaps the executive's genuine arrangement is to bit by bit track down those individuals sufficiently strong to oppose anything destiny appears to have available for them, and offer them the chance to hold on to control of it themselves. Yet again that perhaps one day, humankind will each compose their own arrangement. Thank you for watching and see you again in another movie.